Okay, so the last section in attachment is looking at the influence of early attachment. If you look at older books, this is subdivided down into later relationships and peer relationships, although in the newer books it's not subdivided like that. But we're looking at the influence of early attachment. Now, a lot of this stuff's been covered already. And an important thing here is Bowlby's idea of an internal working model. So if you remember, the internal working model is this representation that you have of relationships formed from your attachment with your primary caregiver during the critical period. And as well as the internal working model, we also link back to Ainsworth and the attachment types. So remember, you've got secure, insecure resistant, and insecure avoidant. So you've got type B, type C, and type A. We're also going to look at something, some research by Hasnan and Shaver, which is something called the Love quiz, which looks at correlation between childhood attachment type or style, and then ideas about adult relationships. Okay, so the internal working model is this idea that we form relationships based on this template we have, this schema we have, based on our relationships with our primary attachment figure. It's about a quality of attachments that we have. That's the important thing. And if we have a good start, then we end up with good relationships. So the argument of the internal working model is type A. So avoidant children might be uninvolved or too emotionally close. Resistant children, type C, might be controlling and argumentative. And the internal working model suggests the bad experience of first attachments can lead to inappropriate behaviour towards friends and partners. So this internal working model can be used to explain relationships in terms of peer relationships and friendships, and also in terms of romantic relationships. Attachment type is also associated with quality of peer relationships and friendships. Securely attached children have the best quality friendships, according to research. Insecurely attached children may have difficulties with friendships. There's some research into this. A study on bullying found that secure children are less involved in bullying. Insecure avoidant children are most likely to be the children that are bullied, so the victims, and insecure resistant, so type C, are more likely to be the bullies. So your attachment style can potentially affect your relationships in later childhood in terms of your friendships, and potentially in terms of bullying and other kind of peer situations. You can then look at attachment styles and relationships in adulthood. So McCarthy looked at a group of women who had their attachment type assessed as infants. They found that the women that were securely attached when they were infants had the best adult friendships and romantic relationships when they were older. The ones that had been categorized as insecure resistant had problems maintaining friendships, and those that had been categorized as insecure avoidant had struggles with intimacy and kind of maintaining adult relationships later on. Hasnan and Shaver created this quiz called the Love Quiz. They then assessed 620 replies to this. It was a quiz that was published in a newspaper. There's a copy of the quiz in your booklet, and there's also a link to it in the work that you have. The three sections of the quiz looked at the current and most important relationship the person filling in the quiz has. Then it looked at their general experiences of love, and then it looked at their attachment type based on kind of a series of statements. What they found was that the securely attached people reported good and longer lasting romance. The ones that came out as insecure avoidant from the third part of the quiz showed jealousy and fear of intimacy. And then the smaller percentage were insecure resistant. And what Hasnan and Shafer concluded was that patterns of attachment behaviour are reflected in romantic relationships. So our attachment style as an infant can affect our relationships when we are adults. Research also suggests that internal working models that we have, schemas that we have based on our childhood attachments, can affect our ability to parent our own children when we're older. And the argument is that we tend to base our parenting style on our own internal working model. Some research in your textbook on this by Bailey looked at 99 mothers that were assessed using this strange situation, and they found the majority of women had the same attachment style to their babies and their own mothers. So there was kind of a history of certain attachment styles repeating. In terms of evaluating this, there is mixed evidence. Some evidence doesn't agree with this in terms of the internal working model. They do tend to predict continuity between infant attachment style and later relationships. But it can be correlational. A lot of it is retrospective, so it's getting people to look backwards. So it's not necessarily the most valid way to investigate. A lot of studies also use questionnaires or interviews instead of using a standardized strange situation experiment. So it can be unrealistic as well as kind of being retrospective. Remember, when you're looking at correlations, there's no cause and effect. So correlations doesn't mean causality. Just because there seems to be a link between attachment type and later relationships doesn't mean that one causes another. It's ignoring other variables that might have affected behavior. It's very deterministic to say that the childhood attachment style will create an adult relationship style. So it's very deterministic. And just a graph to illustrate the fact that correlation does not demonstrate causation. This is an example of a question that you might get on this. So Ned and Nadia, 2-year-old children, they're both assessed for attachment type using strange situation. Ned is categorized as insecure avoidant, while Nadia is secure. Use Bowlby's theory of the internal working model and describe how this may affect their future romantic relationships. Okay, so there's 4 marks for this. It's just to describe, so it's A01. So you get 2 marks for talking about Ned and 2 marks for talking about Nadia. Your marks for Ned, so you could say Ned would struggle forming effective romantic relationships, and that'd be 1 mark. He may not be able to form one at all, and he may be cold or not show affection if he does, and that's your 2nd mark. Remember, AQA would like you to use the names they do, so please refer to Ned by name in your answer. Nadia should be able to successfully form and maintain a romantic relationship. 3rd mark, she already has a secure model in her head, so an internal working model, and she can confidently apply it in later life. And that's your 4th mark. Again, please refer to Nadia by name. You could get a 16-mark question on attachment styles and later relationships. If it was 16, it would be more likely to be a STEM, but please just be mindful that that could happen.